They say that in a modern home, the Wi-Fi signal is the heartbeat of the family. If that's true, then I've been the one keeping this family on life support for 5 years without a single thank you. My name is David Miller. I'm a senior systems architect, which is a fancy way of saying I spend 10 hours a day making sure complex networks don't collapse under their own weight. I'm a man of precision, logs, and silent fixes. If something breaks, I fix it before anyone else notices it was ever down. I live in the house my father built, a sprawling mid-century ranch with a view of the valley. When my sister Sarah lost her job and her husband Kevin's startup evaporated into thin air, I didn't hesitate. I invited them and their 2 teenage kids to move in. Just until you get on your feet, I told them. That was 60 months ago. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, respect isn't a subscription you can cancel whenever you feel like it. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My daily life is a study in invisibility. I wake up at 5:30 a.m., brew a pot of coffee, and retreat to my home office in the converted garage. By the time Sarah and Kevin emerge at 10 a.m., I've already put in half a day's work. I'm the one who hears the hum of the refrigerator and knows the compressor is failing. I'm the one who sees the property tax bill in the mail and quietly pays it online. I'm the one who maintains the smart home ecosystem that Sarah and Kevin use to run their lives. To them, I'm just Uncle Dave, the quiet guy who lives in the garage and occasionally ruins the aesthetic of their dinner parties with my talk of server latency or infrastructure upgrades. Sarah and Kevin are obsessed with the aesthetic. They spend their days filming content for their lifestyle brand, The Modern Nest. They've repainted my father's mahogany walls a minimalist eggshell white and replaced the sturdy oak furniture with gold-trimmed pieces that look expensive but feel like they're made of cardboard. They film cooking segments in the kitchen I paid to remodel and host mastermind sessions on the patio I had resurfaced. In their videos, they talk about owning your space and curating a life of abundance. They never mention that the abundance is subsidized by my salary. The family group chat, titled The Inner Circle, was where everything happened. It was where Sarah posted the grocery lists, which I bought, where Kevin complained about the pool temperature, which I maintained, and where the kids asked for the latest streaming service passwords, which I provided. I didn't talk much in the chat, I just monitored it like a network traffic log. If a request came in, I fulfilled it. But lately, the tone had shifted. Sarah had started a second brand, High Vibe Living, and apparently, my presence didn't fit the vibe. David, Sarah had said to me last Tuesday while she was setting up a ring light in the hallway, "We're hosting the Summer Solstice Gala this weekend. It's a huge networking event for the top influencers in the state. We've invited 60 people. We're going to need the garage for the catering staff. The garage is my office." "Sarah," I said, not looking up from my monitor. "I have a deployment scheduled for Saturday night." "Oh, don't be so rigid," she sighed, checking her reflection in her phone. "It's just for one night. Maybe you could go stay at a hotel? Or visit a friend? We really want the house to feel cohesive. You know how you get when there are strangers around. You look so stressed. It ruins the energy." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the same feeling I get when a server room starts to overheat. "The energy," I repeated. "Exactly. Anyway, I've put the itinerary in the group chat. Make sure you read it so you know when to be out of the way." I went back to my work. I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. I just kept coding. That evening, I reached for my phone to check the grocery list in the inner circle. I tapped the app, scrolled through my messages, and stopped. The chat was gone. I searched for it. Nothing. Then a notification popped up at the bottom of the screen from an hour earlier. Sarah Miller has removed you from the inner circle. I sat there in the dim light of my office, the blue glow of the monitors reflecting off my glasses. I wasn't just removed from a chat, I was being digitally evicted from my own home. I checked the other family apps. My access to the shared calendar? Revoked. The gala guest list spreadsheet? Access denied. I walked into the main house. The kitchen was buzzing. Sarah and Kevin were clinking glasses of expensive kombucha with a couple of content creators I didn't recognize. "Hey, Sarah," I said, standing in the doorway. "I think there's a glitch with the group chat. I've been removed." Sarah didn't even look over her shoulder. She was busy showing someone the smart mood lighting I'd programmed for the kitchen island. "Oh, that wasn't a glitch, David. We just felt the chat needed to be for the active participants of the household, the people involved in the gala. We didn't want to clutter your phone with all the planning details. You're always so busy with your tech stuff anyway." "Active participants?" I asked. "I pay the mortgage, Sarah. I pay the electric bill. I pay for the very Wi-Fi you're using to upload that story right now." Kevin turned around, a smug, enlightened smile on his face. "David, man, don't be so transactional. It's just a chat. We're a family. But right now, this house is a business venue. We're the ones putting in the sweat equity to build the brand. You're just the background noise. Let us handle the house for a while. You just focus on your garage." One of the influencers giggled. "Background noise. That's a good one, Kev." I looked at the four of them. They were standing on my floors, under my roof, drinking from my glasses, and they had decided that I was background noise. They had forgotten the most basic rule of systems administration. The person who controls the infrastructure is the only one who truly owns the network. "You're right, Kevin," I said, my voice as calm as a steady-state signal. "I should focus on my tech stuff. It's been a bit neglected lately. See?" "I knew you'd understand," Sarah said, finally turning to give me a dismissive wave. "Now, could you be a dear and fix the ack in the master suite? It's been a bit chilly. I need it at exactly 72 degrees for my skincare routine." "I'll get right on that," I said. I walked back to my office. I sat down and opened my master admin panel. I pay the bills. I own the routers. I own the smart hubs. I own the security system, the climate control, and the automated gate. Sarah and Kevin wanted a high-vibe gala. They wanted the house to feel cohesive. They wanted me to be invisible. Well, I was about to become the most invisible man they'd ever encountered. I was going to be the ghost in the machine. I started by looking at the autopay settings for the utilities. Then I looked at the member access logs for the smart locks. If I'm just the background noise, then it's time to turn the volume down to 0. The thing about influencers is that they live in a world of mirrors. They only see what's reflected back at them in a front-facing camera. Sarah and Kevin had become so accustomed to the lights being on, the water being hot, and the internet being lightning fast, that they had begun to believe these things were natural phenomena, like gravity or the sunrise. They didn't see the wires, they only saw the vibe. I spent Wednesday evening doing a system audit. While Sarah was in the living room recording a podcast about setting boundaries with negative energy, I was setting boundaries of a different kind. I opened the billing portal for the local utility company. For 5 years, my credit card had been the primary funding source for the electricity, gas, water, and trash services. I didn't just stop the payments. That would be too messy. Instead, I simply unchecked the auto-renew box and moved the account admin email from my primary address to a secondary, encrypted one that Sarah and Kevin didn't even know existed. Then, I looked at the guest list for the summer solstice gala. Sarah had shared it on her public Instagram story to build hype. 60 people, local entrepreneurs, mid-tier models, and lifestyle gurus. They were all coming to my house to celebrate a brand that was built on my silence. I checked my phone. Still no invite back to the group chat. In fact, I saw Sarah had posted a new photo on her feed, a picture of the dining room with the caption, "Pruning the dead weight to make room for new growth." Hashtag high vibe living, hashtag success mindset. I was the dead weight. The realization didn't hurt. It clarified. In engineering, when a component is labeled as dead weight, you remove it from the schematic to see if the structure still stands. I decided it was time to run that simulation. On Thursday morning, the first glitch happened. I was in my office when I heard Sarah's voice echoing through the hallway. "Kevin, why is the Wi-Fi so sluggish? My live stream keeps buffering." "I don't know, babe. Maybe Dave is downloading his tech crap again," Kevin shouted back. I smiled. I hadn't throttled the speed. Not yet. I had simply changed the quality of service settings on the router. I prioritized the garage office MAC address as the emergency tier and downgraded the rest of the house to guest legacy. To Sarah, her 4K upload now had the priority of a dial-up connection from 1996. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Sarah was standing over the router, shaking it as if that would make the bits move faster. "David, the internet is broken," she snapped. "I have a sponsored post due in 20 minutes. Fix it." "I told you, Sarah. I have a big deployment this week," I said calmly. "My office is taking up a lot of bandwidth for the server migrations. You said I should focus on my tech stuff, remember? Not at the expense of my business," she yelled. "Just do your magic or whatever. And remember, the caterers are coming tomorrow to drop off the cold storage. Stay out of their way."
"The caterers," I said. "Right. I assume they'll be using the industrial fridges in the garage?" "Duh," Kevin said, walking in with a yoga mat. "We need the kitchen fridge for the organic appetizers. Don't touch anything in there. It's all labeled for the gala." I looked at the kitchen fridge. It was covered in do not touch stickers. It was funny, they could label the food, but they couldn't label the electricity that kept it cold. That afternoon, I received a notification from the smart lock system. Sarah had shared a digital key with the catering company and 3 of her lead organisers. She hadn't asked me for permission, even though the security system was registered in my name. She was handing out keys to my house like they were flyers for a car wash. I went back to my admin panel. I didn't revoke the keys. Instead, I set a geofence condition. The keys would only work if the primary admin HUNS was detected on the premises via GPS. If I left the property, the house would go into security lockdown. Then came the final insult. I was sitting on the patio, trying to enjoy the sunset, when Sarah's kids, Leo and Mia, came out. They're good kids, but they've been raised in Sarah's high-vibe bubble. "Uncle Dave," Leo said, looking at his phone. "Mum says we're changing the house Wi-Fi password for the gala so the guests have exclusive access. She said we don't need to give you the new one because you have your own nerd cables in the garage. Is that so?" I asked. "Yeah," Mia added. "She said it's part of the rebranding. We're calling the house the Solstice Sanctuary now. She said Miller Ranch sounded too old." They walked away, giggling. I looked at my watch. It was 7 p.m. on Friday. The gala was in 24 hours. They had removed me from the chat. They had rebranded my father's house. They had taken my bandwidth and were planning to lock me out of the very network I built. They forgot one very important detail about the Solstice Sanctuary. A sanctuary needs power. It needs water. It needs a climate-controlled environment to keep 60 influencers from sweating through their linen suits. And most importantly, it needs an admin who is willing to keep the lights on. I stood up and went to my office. I didn't look at the group chat. I looked at the utility disconnect schedule I'd pulled up earlier. The autopay failure notification had just hit Sarah's email, or rather, the secondary email I controlled. She wouldn't see it. She was too busy picking out the right filter for her preparation video. Background noise. I whispered to the empty garage. I started a script on my console. It was a simple if-then command. If the time is 8 p.m. Saturday, the start of the gala, then execute protocol, total transparency. In it, transparency usually means being open, but in my world, it means making the invisible visible. I was going to show them exactly what deadweight looks like when it stops holding up the floor. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of frantic energy usually reserved for a movie set. The driveway was clogged with white vans. Floral artisans, artisanal ice sculptors, and curated charcuterie specialists were buzzing around like ants on a dropped sugar cube. Sarah was in the centre of it all, wearing a headset and holding a clipboard, barking orders at anyone who moved too slowly. I stayed in the garage. I had already packed a small bag with my laptop, some changes of clothes, and my essential documents. I didn't need much. To them, I was already a ghost. I was just making it official. David. Sarah hammered on the garage door around noon. I slid it open just a crack. She looked frazzled, her high-vibe energy replaced by pure, high-octane stress. The ice luge is arriving in 10 minutes. We need the industrial freezer in here cleared out. Move your frozen pizzas or whatever you have in there. The freezer is connected to the garage circuit, Sarah, I said, leaning against the doorframe. I've got some sensitive hardware cooling tests running. If you overload that circuit with an industrial ice luge, it might trip the main breaker. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd see her own brain. Ugh, always with the circuits and the breakers. Kevin said you were just being difficult. Just clear the space. This event is going to put us on the map, David. Don't be the reason we fail. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. In fact, I'm going to get out of your way entirely. I'm heading out for the weekend. I figured the background noise should stay at a distance. Sarah's face lit up with a relief that was almost insulting. Oh, thank God. That's actually really mature of you, Dave. We'll have the house back to normal by Monday. Just make sure the smart home is set to gala mode before you go. It's already programmed, I promised. Everything is on a timer. I grabbed my bag and walked to my truck. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Kevin trying to hang a massive neon sign that read Solstice Sanctuary over the front door. He was using a power drill plugged into an extension cord that was already daisy chained to 3 other outlets. It was an electrical nightmare. I drove to a quiet hotel about 20 minutes away, one with excellent Wi-Fi and a view of the mountains. I checked in, ordered a club sandwich, and opened my laptop. The Solstice Sanctuary was now a closed system. At 4 p.m., the first automated notification hit my screen. Admin alert, utility payment failure final notice. The local electric company had attempted to charge the primary account for the 3rd time. Since I had unlinked my card, and Sarah hadn't bothered to check the secondary email I'd assigned to the account, the payment failed. According to the smart grid protocols in our county, a residential account with a failed final notice is subject to a remote disconnect during peak hours if the balance exceeds a certain threshold. Sarah and Kevin had spent $3,000 on atmospheric lighting this month alone. They were well over the threshold. At 6 p.m., I logged into the home's security cameras. The gala was beginning. The house looked beautiful. I'll give Sarah that. The minimalist white walls were washed in purple and gold light. People in linen dresses and silk shirts were milling about the patio, sipping cocktails. Kevin was near the pool, holding a microphone, giving a speech about manifesting your own reality. I looked at my dashboard. Occupancy, 64 people. Internal temperature, 68 degrees. The AC was working overtime to combat the body heat and the outdoor sun. Power draw, 18.4 kW Naina Ceretry. Wi-Fi devices, 112. Everyone was live stream. At 7:45 p.m., I saw the influencers starting to gather for the main event, the unveiling of the new product line. Sarah was standing on a small stage in the living room. The ice luge was glowing, the neon sign was buzzing, and the mood lighting was pulsating in time with a deep, bass-heavy track. I looked at my watch. 7:59 p.m. Julian stiffened. It's called leveraging assets, Dad. You're retired. You don't see the big picture. We're moving into a new era. The Pioneer Award this Sunday? It's for the vision Tiffany and I have for this county. We're the future. And the past? I asked, looking at his polished shoes. The past is a foundation, Dad. But you don't live in the foundation. You build over it. He checked his watch again. Look, I have to go. Tiffany's at the caterers for the gala. We'll talk next week, okay? Maybe we can do a quick lunch. My treat. He turned back toward the glass room without waiting for an answer. I watched him go. He walked with a bounce in his step, the stride of a man who thought he'd already crossed the finish line. I walked back to my truck and sat there for a long time. I looked at the dashboard, at the layer of dust that always seemed to settle there no matter how much I cleaned it. Julian didn't realize that the land was held in a very specific type of trust, one that my father had insisted on after seeing a neighbor lose his farm in a bad poker game in the 50s. It was a life estate with reversionary interest. In plain English, it meant that while I had given Julian the title to the land 5 years ago as a pre-inheritance gesture, I retained the absolute right to live on, manage, and control that land until the day I died. He couldn't sell a single toothpick of timber without my notarized signature. And more importantly, if he attempted to encumber the land with debt or sell parts of it without my consent, the title would revert, it would snap back to me entirely, as if the gift had never happened. He'd forgotten the fine print. Or maybe he'd never read it, thinking his old man was just being sentimental with the paperwork. I pulled out my phone and called Tiffany. She answered on the 4th ring. Arthur, is everything okay? I'm quite busy with the seating arrangements for Sunday. I heard about the Pioneer Award, Tiffany. Congratulations. There was a pause. A long, cold silence. Oh, Julian was supposed to tell you. It's such a high-level corporate event, Arthur. Very stiff. Lots of speeches about venture capital. We thought you'd be bored to tears. We're planning a much nicer private lunch for you later in the month. Something more your speed. I see, I said. More my speed. Exactly. Anyway, I have to run. The florist is here. She hung up. I didn't feel angry. I felt that strange, quiet calm that comes right before a controlled demolition. You've set the charges. You've cleared the area. Now, you just wait for the clock to hit 0. I drove to Elias Thorne's office. He was waiting for me with a stack of cream-coloured folders. You were right, Arthur, Elias said, sliding a document across the desk. Julian signed a preliminary sale agreement with a developer out of Atlanta yesterday. He took a $2 million earnest money deposit to fund the gala and Tiffany's new lifestyle. He's claiming full, unencumbered ownership. That's fraud, Elias. Technically, yes, but more importantly for us, it triggers the reversionary clause. The moment he signed that document without your signature, he violated the terms of the trust. Elias leaned back, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. As of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, Julian Vance doesn't own a single blade of grass on that property. You do. All of it. Back in your name, 100%. I looked at the paper. My name was there, bold and final. He doesn't know yet, does he? I asked. He thinks he's a pioneer, Elias chuckled. He thinks he's standing on top of the mountain. He doesn't realize the mountain just moved. Good, I said, standing up. Let him enjoy his rehearsals. Let Tiffany pick out the perfect centerpieces. I want them at that dinner on Sunday. I want them at the head table, under the spotlight, feeling like the kings of the world.
I had set a scripted event in the Smart Hub. It wasn't a hack. It was just an optimization routine. If occupancy, Menic 60 AND power draw 15 kW, then execute protocol, transparency. In simple terms, the house was about to ask Sarah who was actually in charge. I reached for my mouse. I didn't click delete. I didn't click off. I simply clicked release admin override. Without my manual override keeping the autopay errors suppressed and the circuit protection software locked, the house's automated systems were forced to face the cold, hard reality of their own status. 8 p.m. The first thing to go wasn't the lights. It was the Wi-Fi. On the camera, I saw 50 people simultaneously look down at their phones. The exclusive gala access had just vanished. The router, detecting an unpaid service account, had redirected every single connected device to a splash page that read, account suspended. Please contact billing. A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah laughed it off into her microphone. Just a little glitch, guys. We're so high vibe, we're breaking the internet. Then, the smart grid remote disconnect hit. The neon sign flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The purple and gold wash lights died. The bass-heavy music cut out with a pathetic pop. The only thing left was the emergency battery-powered lights in the hallway, which cast a sickly, dim green glow over the room. But the real transparency was just beginning. Because I wasn't there to manage the geofence, the smart locks, detecting a system power loss and admin absence, did exactly what they were programmed to do for security. They bolted. Every door, every window, and the main front gate hissed shut and locked. I sat back in my hotel chair, taking a bite of my club sandwich. On my screen, I watched 64 high-vibe influencers realize they were trapped in a dark, hot box with no Wi-Fi and a rapidly melting ice luge. The background noise had officially gone silent. In a house governed by algorithms, silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of an error code. From my hotel room, the security feed, which I had routed through a dedicated cellular backup, showed a scene of mounting panic. The Solstice Sanctuary had become a high-end bunker. The temperature inside was already rising. Without the HVAC system humming, 64 people were breathing the same stagnant air, and the high-vibe energy was rapidly turning into high-octane claustrophobia. I saw Sarah on the living room stage, waving her phone in the air like a magic wand that had lost its spark. She was shouting at Kevin, who was frantically pulling at the handle of the front door. "It's stuck, Sarah. The digital deadbolt is engaged. I can't get the manual override to turn." Kevin yelled. Of course he couldn't. I had installed child safety and security lockouts months ago to prevent intruders. Without the admin's biometric signature or a functioning cloud connection, those doors were effectively vault walls. Then came the second wave. Since the power was cut, the garage circuit, the one Sarah had insisted on overloading with the ice luge, tripped the auxiliary safety. The industrial freezer, filled with thousands of dollars of artisanal cold storage and the exclusive product launch samples, began to defrost. In the dark, the ice luge started to weep, a slow puddle of expensive water creeping across the hardwood floors I'd polished just last week. My phone started to vibrate on the nightstand, calling Sarah Miller. I let it ring, calling Kevin Miller. I let that one ring too. Then came the texts. The family group chat might have been dead for me, but they were certainly trying to reach the dead weight now. Sarah, David, what did you do? The power is out. The guests are freaking out. The doors won't open. Fix it now. Kevin, Dave, man, this isn't funny. We have some high-profile investors here. The house is like an oven. Open the gate. Sarah, I know you're seeing this. I see your active status on the security hub. If you don't turn the lights on, I'm calling the police. I waited exactly 10 minutes. In a crisis, 10 minutes feels like a lifetime. By now, the influencers would be using their phone flashlights, the beams cutting through the dark like frantic fireflies. The aesthetic was dead. The vibe was gone. All that was left was 60 people wondering why their hosts couldn't even pay the electric bill. I finally picked up the phone when Sarah called for the 5th time. "Hello," I said, my voice thick with the feigned sleepiness of someone who was definitely not watching a 4K live stream of their own revenge. "David." Sarah's voice was a shriek. "The house is dead. Everything is dead. We're locked in. The guests are starting to tweet about the Firefest vibes. You have to reboot the system." "Sarah?" "It's 8:15 p.m., I said calmly. "I told you I was away for the weekend." "Is there a problem with the gala?" "A problem? We're trapped in a black hole. The Wi-Fi redirected everyone to a billing failure page. People think we're broke." "David, my brand is dying in the living room." "That's strange," I said, leaning back against the headboard. I checked the logs before I left. It looks like the autopay failed. I assume you updated the billing info with your high-vibe business card when you removed me from the household management chat? You told me you wanted to handle the house for a while. There was a long, pregnant silence on the other end. I could hear Kevin in the background, yelling at a guest who was trying to climb out of a window. I thought you were still the primary. Sarah stammered. You said you pay the bills. I pay for the bills of the people in my inner circle, Sarah. But since I'm just background noise and dead weight, I figured it was time for the active participants to take the lead. I'm just focusing on my tech stuff, like you asked. David, please, she hissed, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. The police are going to come if someone calls in a fire hazard. We'll be ruined. Just turn the power back on. I'll pay you back. I'll add you back to the chat. The chat is just a distraction, Sarah. We're being transactional now, remember? Kevin's words. I looked at my laptop screen. The internal temperature of the house was now 78 degrees. The exclusive product samples in the garage were officially room temperature. I can't reboot it remotely, I lied. The security protocol requires a physical admin presence because of the unpaid status. If you want the lights on, I have to come back. But I'm quite comfortable here at the hotel. It's very cohesive. Whatever you want. Sarah cried. Just come back and open the doors. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said. But Sarah? Tell Kevin to put the microphone back on. I want everyone to hear what I have to say when I walk through that door. I hung up. I didn't rush. I finished my sandwich, closed my laptop, and took the elevator down to the lobby. The Solstice Sanctuary was about to have its most honest moment, and for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't going to be in the background. The drive back to the house was the most peaceful 30 minutes of my life. While my phone blew up with frantic texts from Sarah and Kevin, I listened to a podcast about network security. There's a certain irony in a man whose job is to prevent system failures intentionally letting one happen to save his own sanity. When I pulled into the driveway, the scene was chaotic. The Solstice Sanctuary neon sign was dark, but the flashing red and blue lights of a patrol car were parked at the front gate. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, drawn by the sight of 60 people in cocktail attire, waving their phone flashlights through the windows of a dark mansion. I stepped out of my truck, my movements slow and deliberate. Kevin was at the gate, sweating through his silk shirt, arguing with a police officer. My brother-in-law is coming. He's the only one with the code. Kevin was shouting. I'm right here, Kevin, I said, stepping into the light of the police cruiser. David. Finally. Kevin lunged toward the gate. Open the damn thing. The officer is talking about a disturbing the peace citation and a safety violation for the locked doors. I didn't look at Kevin. I looked at the officer. Good evening, officer. I'm David Miller, the homeowner. I'm sorry for the disturbance. We had a major utility payment failure and a system lockout. I'm here to clear the property. I pulled out my phone and tapped a single command on my master admin app. The gate hissed open. I walked up the driveway, the officer following me, and Kevin trailing behind, hissing at me under his breath. You're dead, Dave. You ruined everything. Henderson was here, the biggest VC in the valley, and he had to use his phone light to find the bathroom. A bathroom that didn't even flush because the sensors are dead. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the front door. I placed my thumb on the scanner. Min biometric confirmed. System restore initiated. The heavy oak door clicked open. I stepped into the house. It was a swamp. The smell of 60 sweaty people, expensive perfume, and melting artisanal ice hit me like a wall. The emergency lights were still glowing green, making everyone look like they were in a low-budget horror movie. Sarah was in the center of the living room, surrounded by guests who were looking for their purses and coats. When she saw me, her high-vibe facade didn't just crack, it shattered. You, she pointed a trembling finger at me. You did this on purpose. You wanted to humiliate us in front of everyone. You waited for the exact moment of the launch. I walked past her to the kitchen island, picked up the microphone Kevin had dropped, and tapped it. It was dead. I walked over to the main electrical panel behind a hidden decorative door, the one I'd told them never to cover, and flipped the master relay. The lights surged back to life. The ACK groaned as the fans began to spin. The Wi-Fi routers chimed. I stepped back to the center of the room. The guests were frozen, squinting in the sudden brightness. "Attention, everyone," I said, my voice projected by the now active speaker system. "My name is David Miller. I'm the deadweight Sarah mentioned in her Instagram story today. I'm also the person who pays the mortgage on this house, the electricity you were just using, and the Wi-Fi you were using to live stream your abundance." A murmur went through the room. I saw Sarah's face go from white to a deep, embarrassed purple. "There was no glitch tonight," I continued. "There was simply a transition. Sarah and Kevin wanted me out of the inner circle. They wanted a house that reflected their brand, and tonight they got exactly that. A brand with no foundation, no infrastructure, no reality." I looked at Sarah. "The party is over. Not just the gala, but the 5-year free trial of your lifestyle. David, stop it." Sarah screamed, moving toward me. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to that cold, technical tone. "I'm auditing the account, and the balance is 0. Officer, please help these guests find the exit. This is a private residence, and the residents are currently being evicted." "You can't evict us," Kevin shouted. "We live here. We have rights." "You have the right to the sweat equity you put into the brand, Kevin," I said, sliding a folder onto the kitchen island. "But as of 8 p.m. tonight, I've terminated the informal lease. This house is registered as a work live studio under my LLC. Since you were removed from the Inner Circle chat, I assumed you'd want to start your new high vibe journey somewhere else. Somewhere you actually pay the bills." The guests didn't wait to hear more. They flooded out of the house, whispering, filming the fallout on their phones. The Summer Solstice Gala was trending, all right, but not for the product launch. It was trending as the greatest influencer fail of the year. Sarah sank onto one of the gold-trimmed chairs, her head in her hands. The ice luge had melted into a puddle that was now soaking into her expensive rug. "Why?" she whispered. "Because, Sarah," I said, setting the microphone down, "you forgot that you can't have a high vibe if you don't have a ground. And I'm tired of being the only thing keeping you from the dirt. The morning after a crash is always the most honest part of the day." By 8 a.m., the house was bright, quiet, and smelling faintly of industrial floor cleaner. The Solstice Sanctuary neon sign was sitting by the curb, waiting for the trash collectors, and the gold-trimmed furniture looked remarkably flimsy in the unforgiving morning light. I was in the kitchen, brewing a fresh pot of coffee, the real stuff, not the artisanal bean juice Kevin usually insisted on, when Sarah and Kevin shuffled in. They looked like they hadn't slept a wink. Sarah's eyes were puffy, and Kevin was staring at his phone, which was likely a graveyard of missed calls and unfollow notifications. "The lawyers called," Kevin said, his voice flat. "Henderson pulled the investment. He said he doesn't invest in founders who can't keep their own lights on. Our brand is a joke, Dave. People are calling it the Solstice Sinkhole on Twitter." "I told you," I said, pouring a cup of coffee. "Infrastructure matters." Sarah looked up, her expression a mix of defeat and lingering resentment. "So what now? Are we really on the street? You're really throwing your sister and her kids out?" "Welcome back to Dad's true revenge. If you've reached the final chapter, remember, the best revenge isn't about leaving people with nothing. It's about leaving them with the truth. Hit that subscribe button and let us know. Have you ever been the invisible one who finally turned off the power? I'm not throwing the kids out, I said, sitting down at the table. I slid 2 copies of a new document across the island, but the Miller Ranch is under new management. This is a formal lease agreement. Kevin reached for it, squinting. A lease? We're family, Dave. This is a performance-based lease, I corrected him. You stay in the guest wing, not the master suite that's being converted back into my primary office. The garage is mine, fully secured. And here are the terms. The inner circle is gone. There is one Wi-Fi network. I am the admin. You get access for 4 hours a day, provided your chores are done. Utilities are split 3 ways. Since you have no income, you'll earn your share through property maintenance. Kevin, you're on landscaping and pool duty. No more robots. You're doing it by hand. No influencer filming in the common areas. This is a home, not a set. If I see a ring light in the kitchen, the Wi-Fi password changes. And most importantly, you are back in the group chat. But it's a read-only chat for you. I post the bills, the schedules, and the rules. You tap heart to acknowledge. Sarah looked at the paper. Then, at me. You're turning us into servants? No, I said, taking a sip of coffee. I'm turning you into residents. You spent 5 years pretending the foundation didn't exist. Now, you're going to help me maintain it. If you don't like it, the minimalist lifestyle is waiting for you at the motel down the street. Kevin looked at the shattered remains of his ego, then at the pen on the table. He signed. Sarah followed a moment later, her hand trembling. One more thing, I said, standing up. I've updated the smart home settings. Since you were so worried about the energy of the house, I've programmed a new aesthetic mode. Whenever I enter a room, the lights dim slightly, and the speakers play a very specific frequency. What frequency? Sarah asked. Background noise, I smiled. As they walked away to begin their first day of real work in 5 years, I sat back and opened my laptop. My network was secure. My bills were paid. And the house was finally, truly cohesive. Some people think power is about the followers you have, or the vibe you curate. But I know better. Power is about the man in the garage who knows how to flip the switch. I checked the new group chat. I had just posted the grocery list and the 10:00 am pool cleaning schedule. Kevin Miller and Sarah Miller have hearted your message. The delivery was complete. The admin was back in control. And for the first time in a long time, the Wi-Fi signal wasn't the only thing that was strong in this house.